a cult leader who would purify followers of their sins by beating them while nude, testing their devotion by forcing them to break their own legs with sledgehammers, shoot each other, cut each other's fingers and toes off with wire cutters, sit on lit stoves, eat dead mice and feces, and other unimaginable violent acts. Today we're meeting Roch Theriault, one of the most savage and evil cult leaders in history. I'm John Genoa, host of America's Strangest History, and this is a World Edition story about a Canadian cult known as the Ant Hill Kids. Settle back because this one's insane. Roch Theriault was born into a French-Canadian family back in 1947. He had a colorful childhood, to say the least. He dropped out of school in the 7th grade, and believing the end of the world was near, taught himself the Old Testament. In 1977, while living in Quebec, he eventually converted from Catholicism to become a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Coincidentally, it was the same year he founded his own religious movement. His original plan, so he said, was to form a commune where people could hang out and listen to his motivational speeches. They'd be free from sin and live in unity and equality. It was made up of people he'd come across in the church, but things quickly turned dark. Theriault claimed that God had personally warned him that the end of the world would arrive in February 1979, and then banned anyone in his group from either talking to their families or anyone in the church. Ironically, he claimed this communications blackout ran contrary to his cult's values of freedom. It was now 1978, and on the pretense of it being a place they could all be saved, Theriault relocated his commune halfway up the mountainside. He ordered his followers to build the new commune while he sat back and relaxed. As he watched them working and running up and down the mountainside that he'd renamed Eternal Mountain, he was struck by how much his followers resembled ants working on an anthill. This inspired him to dub the group the Ant Hill Kids. February 1979 rolled around, and of course no apocalypse arrived. Theriault defended his actions, saying that the passage of time on Earth was different to God's, hence the miscalculation. Luckily for him, his followers believed him, but Theriault needed to grow his commune, so he began marrying all of the women in it and fathered over 20 children with 9 of them. Within a couple of years, his cult grew to nearly 40 members. Theriault made them all wear identical tunics, which, according to him, represented equality and their devotion to the commune. Operations expanded, and Theriault began looking around for a bigger location. In 1984, he moved the cult to a hamlet in central Ontario. From here, if you can believe it, things started taking a far darker turn. Theriault's drinking problems worsened. He began moving away from being a motivational leader and instead began exerting totalitarian control over his followers. His beliefs changed too, becoming even more irrational, if you can believe that. Cult members were forbidden to talk to each other without him being present, nor could they have sex with each other without his permission. The Ant Hill Kids raised money by selling baked goods, and Theriault began punishing those who couldn't bring enough in. Question: how did he get away with it? Cultists were taken in by his charisma. Theriault wasn't questioned for his bad judgment and remained unblamed for all the physical, emotional, and mental abuse he was inflicting on them. Theriault started to introduce a system of punishments he'd dole out if he thought his followers were straying. He'd spy on them, claiming God had told him what they were up to. If a follower wanted to leave, Theriault would beat them with a belt or, in some cases, a hammer. He'd suspend them from the ceiling, he'd pluck out each of their body hairs individually, and he'd even defecate on them. Well, if you can believe it, things started getting even worse. Far more extreme and far more violent. Turn away now if you're squeamish. Theriault began ordering his followers to break their own legs with sledgehammers. He ordered them to sit on lit stoves. He made them shoot each other in the shoulders. He forced them to eat dead mice and feces. Sometimes, to prove their loyalty, Theriault would tell one member to cut off another member's toes with wire cutters. He sexually abused the children, held them over fires, nailed some to trees, and had the other kids stone them. One of his wives, desperate to save her child from horrific abuse, she intentionally left her newborn outside to die in freezing temperatures rather than be subject to Theriault's evil and maniacal whims. Theriault, perhaps knowing he had to change some kind of philosophical tactic, swung back to the original religious mission of his commune. But to see that through, he took to purifying his followers. He forced them to participate in sessions where members would have to strip naked and endure beatings and whippings. He also started claiming to be holy, and to show off his newfound healing powers, he began performing unnecessary surgical operations on sick members. Some of these surgeries, by the way, included injecting a 94% ethanol solution directly into their stomachs. They also included his performing circumcisions on men and boys. Things started coming to a head in 1987 when social workers removed 17 of the kids, but amazingly, Theriault faced no repercussions for his actions. In fact, he kept going, and oh boy did he keep going. In 1989, Solange Bolliard, one of the commune members, reported an upset stomach. Theriault's answer was to perform more amateur surgery, only without anesthesia. He had Solange lie naked on the table, then punched her in the stomach. He then forced a plastic tube into her rectum and performed an enema with olive oil and molasses. If that wasn't enough, he then used a knife to cut her abdomen open and, with his bare hands, ripped out part of her intestines. He then had another of his followers stitch up Solange with a needle and thread, and then had that person insert a tube down Solange's throat and blow through it. Solange died the next day. Not to be deterred, Theriault had his followers saw off the cap of Solange's skull. Claiming to have the powers of resurrection, Theriault then ejaculated onto Solange's brain. Needless to say, Solange wasn't resurrected. Instead, her corpse wound up buried a short distance away from their commune. Theriault continued the madness until one of the members, a Gabriel Lavelle, underwent a particularly brutal treatment. Now, what I'm about to describe is sick, pretty gross. It's the kind of thing that shocks the conscience, so if you're easily triggered by this kind of stuff, please fast forward about 20 seconds or so. Lavelle suffered welding torch burns to her genitals. She had 8 of her teeth forcibly removed, and a hypodermic needle broke off in her back. Lavelle then had parts of her breast cut off and her head smashed in with the blunt side of an axe, all by Theriault. At that point, Lavelle tried escaping, but upon her return, Theriault used wire cutters to remove one of her fingers. He pinned her hand to a wooden table with a hunting knife, then sliced off her arm with a cleaver. It wasn't until Lavelle escaped the commune later that year and contacted authorities that Theriault's reign of terror finally came to an end. Up until that point, local authorities had been legally unable to investigate the adults because the commune had been officially registered as a church. Theriault was convicted of assault and thrown in jail for 12 years. Most of his cult left, but unbelievably some still stayed. While imprisoned, Theriault used conjugal rights to father another 4 children. But Lavelle's testimony led to more investigations, and in 1993, Theriault pled guilty to second-degree murder for the killing of Solange Bolliard. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, but on February 26, 2011, Theriault was found dead near his cell. He died after an altercation with his cellmate, a 60-year-old convicted murderer who was already serving a life sentence. The cellmate apparently shivved Theriault in the neck, then walked calmly to the guard station, handed over the weapon, and told them, "Here's the knife, I sliced him up." And that's how Theriault came to his final, inglorious end. I'm John Genoa. This is America's Strangest History. Make sure your doors are locked. Oh, and stay away from cults. You're smarter than that. See you again soon.